how can we bring retail on board at a faster rate than institutions so that the wealth and prosperity of Bitcoin can be spread amongst the people rather than the larger corporations? People that are less represented in the population in terms of personality seem to be the first to adopt. And when I think about the technology adoption cycle, these are your innovators, your early adopters.
Nobody cares about the price except it goes up exponentially. Then all of a sudden everyone pays attention. The fiat system will collapse anyways. Even if Bitcoin also isn't there, if Bitcoin wouldn't exist, fiat would also fail. From there on, I just needed one more year of research to go from like 1% allocation to all in. I sold all my stocks except Tesla and put it all in Bitcoin. This was a huge stepping stone for me.
How do you get your balance sheet for your company based in Bitcoin growing at 29% ARR to the point where you get financially free that the money doesn't drive the decision so you can focus on just really cool shit?
How many people actually have over 50% of their liquid net worth in Bitcoin? Like that, how big is that number? Because if Bitcoin is actually sound money, it makes sense personally to hold most of your money in Bitcoin.
As it becomes the safe haven, like how we treat bonds today will be what Bitcoin is in the future, which is just a stable asset returning, a 2, 3, 4, 5%. I want to be someone that takes the value that Bitcoin is allowing us to save now, but then deploying it to create real world impact.
It's important that we Bitcoiners use that purchasing power, use that financial energy that we have to actually do something meaningful in the world.
The scarcest asset is your time, because you're only here for a set amount of time on this planet.
I completely shifted from being an aggressive Bitcoin orange pillar to just being there for people. Because I've noticed people will develop an interest, be someone that lives a happy, meaningful, and healthy life, because people notice that.
You should not feel guilty that they're not orange pilled as quickly as you would like, because at the end of the day, they need to be ready to come through. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Bitcoin Curve podcast. My name is Arvind Shanmuga Nathan, and in today's episode, I have a guest, which is very different to what you've been seeing more recently, and I am incredibly thrilled to have Robin Seyr. Did I get that one right? Seyr?
Oh, yeah, Seyr is perfect, yeah.
Beautiful.
I think if for the first time ever heard your last name pronounced right, I was always wondering how it's pronounced, and I just took with Arvind.
Yeah, it's a bit of a behemoth. So before we dive in, I want to give the audience a bit of an understanding as to who Robin is and why he's here. So if you've listened to the first few episodes of this podcast or read the Substack, you'll understand that my mission here is to scale Bitcoin beyond money, and that is very much a research focus. But as part of any research, you always have to go and talk to people that may hold knowledge that you don't, experts in their fields that can bring a unique lens or thought to help unblock sometimes the blockages you get as you start to dive into research, and they can be incredibly frustrating. And so today's conversation is anchored around the next article that I'm publishing on the Substack, which is called Crossing the Chasm. And the intent of this article is to help people understand who the next wave of Bitcoiners are entering the space. How can we bring retail on board at a faster rate than institutions so that the wealth and prosperity of Bitcoin can be spread amongst the people rather than the larger corporations? And in today's podcast, Robin's going to help me unblock a couple of things that I'm stumbling on, and he'll help me get some direction to that. But I asked Grok, who is Robin Seyr, so I could put up a bit of an intro for him, because a lot of the people that watch this will probably be on the LinkedIn from my professional network. And so if I go to Grok, this is what Grok is saying about Robin Seyr. So Robin Seyr is a prominent figure in the Bitcoin community, known for his work as a podcast host and content creator. His professional background stems from software development and IT security. He has worked as a software tester and developer, and later as a pre-sales engineer. And today he is the host of the Robin Seyr podcast, and endeavors to have daily podcasts on his platform with guests. And when I was going back and forth about having Robin on the podcast, he did mention that he had just hit 320 recordings, but I'm sure that is now increased. And so over a 1 year period to have that many conversations, that is part of the reason why he's here today, because if anyone's going to know, get a feel, of who that next wave of Bitcoiners are, it absolutely is Robin. To have done so much in such a short period of time, true testament, proof of work. So with that, Robin, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for that warm intro. It's really cool to see Grok. I did the same thing for myself with ChatGPT. It was pretty similar, I would say. It's really cool, but it's also scary how good the AIs already know us.
And I for the first time when I was looking at this, it actually shows how many sources that it came from. So there's 15 web pages that was used in order to build up that intro. So Grok's improving quite a bit.
Pretty unique name. When you type in Google Robin Seyr, I think the first 2-3 pages is just my links, because there's apparently no second Robin Seyr out there.
Well, that's lucky. That's good. I think that's what most people in show business would say would be one of the more perfect names.
Yeah, I don't have to spend much money on the how's it called, the SEO, the search engine optimization, or the AI search engine optimization now.
Yep, awesome. Hey, to start this one off, if you've been on Twitter anytime recently, and now talking more so to the guests, you probably would have seen this Myers-Briggs personality profile. And I thought a great way to start this discussion around the next wave of Bitcoiners was understanding who are the Bitcoiners today, and where are those emerging shoots of people that are starting to enter the space. And so I will quickly pop this one up on screen, and I will credit the individual that did this. So Brandon Quittem, and Robin, can you just let me know if you're seeing that on your screen?
I see that, yeah, perfectly fine.
Yeah, beautiful. So he published this, and so a bit of backstory to this piece of data. He put up a poll to his audience, and around 500 people from X responded and provided their Myers-Briggs personality profile. And out of that 500, this is the data that spat out. So this wasn't a broad population study. This was very much within an ecosystem, asking the Bitcoiners in that space, what is your personality profile? And this is what came up. And to help with this discussion, I thought I'd reorder it and show where we are on this scale. So, and the reason why I've done it this way is twofold. Number one, we see where the Bitcoiners, the big proportion of Bitcoiners come from in terms of their personality profile. But as well, it helps show the population distribution slightly better. So apparently, I'm part of the most popular wave of Bitcoiners, which is interesting, being up there. Although I will say I flipped between ENTJ and INTJ as I went from sales to consulting. I went more introverted. And yourself, you are ENFJ. So you're one of these smaller population cohorts, which I found interesting. And the piece that I took away, and I'll throw to you, Robin, to get some reflections, is if you look at the bottom three that apparently have got zero Bitcoin adoption, you'll see that they're also the largest areas of our global population at 13, 12, and 8, although there is 10 as well. But I think what I take away from this is people that are less represented in the population in terms of personality seem to be the first to adopt. And when I think about the technology adoption cycle, these are your innovators, your early adopters, and then we're about to head into that early majority. And those bottom three, I'm thinking, are towards the late majority and the laggards. But that was my takeaway from it. But looking at this, and you've spoken to quite a few people, where does your mind go when you see this?
So first of all, I think what I've learned from the over 300, soon 400 conversations that I already had with Bitcoiners, the variety of conversations I had ranges all the way from Michael Saylor, Jeff Booth, Natalie Brumnell, from the people that we all know, the people that have probably hundreds, maybe thousands, I don't know, maybe over tens of thousands of hours of research in them. Especially someone like Michael Saylor or Jeff Booth, all in all, like they really dove deep into Bitcoin. all the way down to, or not down to, like just another spectrum of a regular science teacher who has a normal job, who just, I discovered him on Twitter, and he doesn't even do, he has probably like 20 tweets out there, and he just likes to teach science on a school, and he also talks about Bitcoin with his students every now and then. But he also went down deep into the rabbit hole of Bitcoin. So from my spectrum of guests, there are like so many different people in there. So it's really hard to say like, oh, that's the personality traits. And even with the both of us, like we are in different cohorts of the personality traits. So first, the Bitcoiners that are now in, they are a special breed. They are very, they all had to go through an ego death, because everyone thinks in Bitcoin they're late. So everyone that thinks they're late, they have to get over that ego thing where, oh, someone bought at $1 and I have to buy now at $100. That's unfair. They have to go through that ego death. Someone bought at $1,000 and I had to buy at $10,000. That's unfair. No. Ego death. Like, it doesn't matter someone else bought lower. It matters that you adopt the best money ever. And a lot of people, I think, cannot deal with that, especially when I talk with people that are outside of Bitcoin. They're like, oh, but what happens to the rich Bitcoin OGs? Are they not have a lot of wealth if Bitcoin actually succeeds? And I'm like, of course, they deserve that. And maybe we can also go into that, why they deserve that, and why it's so hard to be in Bitcoin OG, and why most of them probably lost most of the Bitcoin they ever had, and they only have a small percentage of the original buys. But yeah, so that is the first thing, the ego death that the Bitcoiners has to go through. And then you have to be curious. You have to be you have to have the time to dive deep. If you are like a manager who has 80-hour weeks, you maybe have the capacity to understand Bitcoin. I think almost everyone has the capacity to understand Bitcoin, but they don't have the time. They just go through the motions. They're so worried with like managing people, doing the stuff, and it's not just management. It's just like regular people that have a highly engaged job. Maybe they have kids at home. They have other responsibilities, and they don't have the time to sit down and just research Bitcoin deeply. Those people will come on Bitcoin once it's super obvious. Once we are on I talked with Parker Lewis recently on the podcast about that, and he thinks that we get to the point once Bitcoin is the biggest currency, once Bitcoin gets to a bigger size than the US dollar, that is a threshold that he is looking at. Maybe it's the $1 million mark, maybe it's something else. So once Bitcoin is at a very obvious size, and like you as a busy person have the problem of like, I have a bad money, I see it with inflation, I want to have a good money, oh, this Bitcoin thing works. Like, you don't care why it works, you just like, it works. That's why people went from fax machines and writing normal letters to emails and WhatsApps, because it works. Nobody understands the mechanics behind WhatsApp. Like, if you go out on the street and ask 200 strangers to explain in detail what's going on the back end of WhatsApp, they have no clue. Like, maybe there's like one weird guy on there that can explain it on a very deep level, but 199 people have no clue. The same thing will happen with Bitcoin. We are now in such an early cohort that actually wants to understand what's going on with Bitcoin. We actually want to look behind the scenes. We care how the full nodes are running, how the miners are operating. Someone that's coming in the late maturity, the later phase of the adoption, they won't care. They just saw, oh yeah, Bitcoin worked for the last 20 years as the best money ever. Everyone is in there. Yeah, it's a money that I have to adopt. It's just because it works. The same way that people adopt WhatsApp or any other technology, or people came from candles to light bulbs to LEDs. So it's just a technology that's so obvious that we don't even have to explain why it's better. It just shows how good it is. And right now we are still in the early cohort because of the high volatility that scares a lot of people. I think that there's still a lot of things people confuse risk with volatility. So when we look at the I don't know, a single mom that has to work one job and has to be a mom that has just no time whatsoever to research, she just says, I have to pay bills. I cannot adopt the money that goes up 50% in a month and then goes down 30%. So the volatility is something that will scare out a lot of people that are that busy and don't have the time to research deeply. And that's kind of my first thought of like where we are. I don't even remember the question again. What you again?
You did start to touch on a few things, and I want to double click on a couple of them because I think that there were some good nuggets there. The first one was around when the Bitcoin market capitalization topples the US dollar market capitalization. If I were to say that was one scenario versus Bitcoin just works, because that was the other piece that you were alluding to around people just want to use something that works. If it just worked, do you think it would matter about Bitcoin toppling the US dollar market capitalization if it just worked? Or would the volatility on the rise up still be too much?
They go hand in hand because people see, we always say the price doesn't matter, but the price is the most important metric for non-Bitcoiners. For pre-coiners, for no-coiners, that's the most important metric. That's the only thing most people know about Bitcoin. That's the only thing the news is reporting. When the Bitcoin all-time high broke in Austria, guess what the Austrian mainstream media reported? The price. And they not only talked about how they hit the all-time high, they also said like, oh, if you invested in 2010 in Bitcoin, now you have so much money and so much gain. But if you invested and that was super funny, they put out like, if you invested in 2021 on the high and then sold at the low, then you have lost so much money. That's actually the most credible, biggest mainstream media of Austria. That's all they reported. Nothing fundamental. They didn't talk about anything except the price. And it's also interesting. I was on Sunday on a family gathering again, and my small niece, my small cousin came to me, and she's like, "Oh, I also have now Bitcoin." She's like, I don't know, 15, 16 years old, and I asked, "Oh, why did you buy Bitcoin? Why did you do that?" And she's like, "Oh yeah, because it's almost at 100K now." Huh? Oh, well, it matters for people. Like it's so like Bitcoin doesn't change if it's like at 95,000 or at like 105,000. It's like the market cap is not significantly higher. Of course, there's more money in there, but the psychology plays a big role, and the price is something that definitely does play a role. Even with Bitcoiners, I make a lot of Bitcoin videos, and I try to not bring up the price in every video and put it in the thumbnail, but honestly, it's hard because it works.
Yeah.
Like when I put the price in there or like a 10x number or whatever in the thumbnail, people click more on that thumbnail. It's just data. Like I can clearly see it. If I don't put the price in there and don't put keywords like retirement or something that hints on the price on there, people don't click that much. So. And that's a Bitcoiner crowd. So the price does matter. And we can say so much like, oh, it doesn't care. We don't care about the US dollar price. We don't care about our euro Bitcoin price. But the data clearly shows that people care. Maybe they talk about something else. And especially you see it in the bear cycles, it's a little bit lower. Like in the bear cycles, people don't talk about the price that much. But now in the bull run, you probably also noticed it's in the last month how much price and chart things there are now on Twitter.
Oh,
it's a completely
so
different
much.
world. It's completely different world to like 5 months ago. So nobody cares about the price except it goes up exponentially. Then all of a sudden everyone pays attention. So as a marketing tool, as you also asked the question of like, how do we get people in? As a marketing tool, we need the price, but the price is not something that we can work on. The price is just like a consequence of the overall adoption. For me, the price shows two things. The first thing is what the price shows is how bad the fiat system is doing. And the fiat system will collapse anyways. Even if Bitcoin also isn't there, if Bitcoin wouldn't exist, fiat would also fail. Fiat falls under their own weight. They don't have any leg to stand on, no matter if there's Bitcoin or not. It's just maybe with Bitcoin it collapses quicker. Maybe Bitcoin makes it prolongs it because people buy it for the reserves. That's an interesting discussion to have, but it doesn't matter. Fiat will collapse, and they either have then a new currency, as they always do, or they finally go on a Bitcoin standard. That's a big question that I cannot even really answer, and then most of my guests are split on that. But fiat will fail, and there's no question about that, with Bitcoin or without Bitcoin. So that's the first thing that the Bitcoin price kind of shows, because people fleeing that system, people go from the Titanic to the lifeboat, and that's kind of the scoreboard of how bad the fiat system is doing. And at the same time, if people flee from the system, they also adopt a new one. So it shows not only how bad fiat is doing, it also shows how quickly Bitcoin is being adopted. I like to couple the hash rate to it, because I think the hash rate is also something that shows how good and how healthy the Bitcoin system right now is, because it's an actual metric that we can look at for adoption. But the price, it just matters. People don't want to admit that, but it does matter. It does something. We want to sit on the family dinner and not being mocked upon. Like we want to be the winners on the family tables that say like, hey, see, I told you about Bitcoin when it was 5,000, now it's 100,000. Maybe you should have listened to me. Like, even if we are too humble to say that, there's a small inner part that wants to have that. I think that's human and that's normal. And yeah, it's but as an actual Bitcoin, it's always hard, because you have that one heart that knows, like, especially if you're a young Bitcoiner like me, I'm 26 years old only. I don't want to spend money now. I just wanna experience the world. I just wanna go deep on work and go deep on relationships, and I don't want to spend a lot. I don't need any fancy things. I have an apartment, that's it. So that I don't want to have a lot of money now. But if I'm 35 or I'm like 45 and maybe I have kids, or I want to have like a house, or like the other, it's another phase of my life, then I want to have money. So I'm always like, I'm happy when the price goes up, but I'm also aware of like, I get less Bitcoin, and there's only a finite amount of Bitcoin. It's like Manhattan is being developed, and you really want to grab a few more lands. So there's always this, I'm happy if it goes down, and I'm happy if it goes up kind of feeling.
So I've got so many questions now, but the first one I'll go to is, you're 26. You're probably one of the more stoic 26-year-olds that I've seen to be able to forego stuff in the short term for long term. And you mentioned 35. That's where I am right now. So I'm one step ahead, but pretty much on the same path. What was it that resonated with you that got you to then be fully orange pilled?
I think I got lucky. I think I got really lucky. Because I got into Bitcoin since 2021, since I'm 23 years old, I'm all in Bitcoin. And I got into Bitcoin in 2020. I was then 22 years old. Actually, I was 21 years old because it was before my birthday. So since 20 years old, I'm into Bitcoin. And since 23 years old, I'm all in Bitcoin. And I have to say, first of all, it transforms your life in a meaningful way, because you don't have to worry what stock to buy, or what Apple is doing, or like what Elon Musk on a podcast says about the Tesla stock. I did that game, and that's also a little bit of the story how I got orange pilled. because I was into Tesla, I was into Apple, I was all in the tech stocks because I'm a software developer, because I'm really close to technology. And there I just got to so much. I had a lot of success with the stocks, but it was also a lot of hurdle, like listening to all the conference calls, keeping up with the news. It's a full-time job. It's not something that you go and do next to a full-time job. I could do it because I was still in school and university, so I had a lot of time. And so I was successful because I had a lot of time to research, and I was ahead of most people from information-wise. But then I completely switched, 24 years old. And what happens is you all of a sudden have time for the life that you actually want to live. You actually have time for, oh, what do I want to contribute to society? If I don't have to study 20 hours a week on the newest stocks and what they're doing, it's amazing what you can do in those 20 hours, productive. and I think also a lot about what happens when all of society, all of a sudden, don't have to be a portfolio manager. If a doctor can just focus on saving people's life and don't have to be a portfolio manager on the side. I was just at the doctor's because I got a blood exam once a year and just want to see if everything is right. And I came in with that t-shirt, and he's like, "Oh, you're into crypto," and I'm like, "No, Bitcoin." And he immediately said, "Oh, you're a Bitcoin maxi." Oh no, we have war immediately with my doctor. So that was fun. I was surprised that the doctor knew so much. Like I said, no, only Bitcoin, and immediately he went, "Oh, you're Bitcoin maxi." So he clearly did a little bit of research. So that was fun to see. But yeah, definitely it was a lot of luck that I came into Bitcoin because I was in stocks, and then so many people, because I was good in stocks. I was not good. I had a lot of luck in there. And then people kept bothering me about that Bitcoin thing. And I said, it's a scam. I don't like it for 3 years straight, even though I had no clue about it. But then more people asked me and went in this rabbit hole for a weekend, went into it Friday thinking it's a scam. And then on Sunday, I came out and said, it might not be a scam. It might be something. And this was in 2020. It was also around the area where Michael Saylor came onto the scene. And he really spoke to me. For some reason, he really resonated with me because he spoke more to stock investors. He spoke more to because he is a publicly traded CEO, a CEO of a publicly traded company. And therefore, he spoke in more detail for me. Also, Anthony Pompliano and other people were really influential in my orange pilling, with Seyr Dynamos, with Andreas Antonopoulos, and all those people. But I think Marcus Saylor was the main ones. That's why it was also a really big moment for me to have him on my podcast. And yeah, from there on, I just needed one more year of research to go from 1% allocation to all in. So that was kind of my orange pilling story. And what really clicked for me in the beginning was that, that's an interesting investment. That's like a new gold form. And I was like, gold has actually a pretty big market cap. And if Bitcoin goes to the gold market cap, that's a huge jump. So in the beginning, as I think most people do, I just wasn't interested in making an investment, just making betting on a new thing. It was just I had Tesla, I had Apple, I had other investments. I was looking into real estate. There's this Bitcoin thing. I can also invest in that. And I think I got lucky because it was at a time where I had time to research. Because as you have seen from the personality test, I probably am someone that would have came in a little bit later originally, but because of luck, because it was just a good timing, people kept bothering me about Bitcoin. I had a boring civil service job that all Austrians are forced to do for 1 year after or after school, which is complete nonsense. But yeah, luckily I had time to research then.
So Austria has effectively national service, so not military service, but back of house
it has
service?
a military service for 6 months, but you can opt out of that military service. Then you have to do 9 months of civil service, where you have to go to either kindergarten, get to elderly people, and do that for 9 months.
Oh, that's interesting.
And the interesting thing is, because I had an IT background, they put me half the day into caring for kids, which was super fun because it was afternoon, and I just played football all the time with them in the summer outside, in the winter inside. So I got really good in football, actually, in that 9 months. And then on the mornings, I was the IT guy. I literally got a car, a phone, and just was sent around Upper Austria and was exchanging computers, were trying to fix things. It was really fun.
Cool.
It was not something like a slave thing, but essentially it is like that. Austria does force you to do that, and it's not something you can opt out. You can opt out if you have really bad health. If you get from a doctor like you are really not capable of doing anything, then you can opt out. But yeah, most people in that age are very capable of doing things, and you have to be really, there has to be something major wrong with your health, or you just, go fake it. There are people that fake that thing also, because they just go to a psychology person and they say that, oh, like he's mentally not ready to do that. But that's another rabbit hole, how people try to get out of Austrian civil service.
No, and that's fair. Like, it happens around the world. Like, Malaysia introduced it and funny backstory, I was a Malaysian citizen. I gave it up because they were introducing random military service, and I live in Australia, so I didn't.
Random?
Yeah, it was at the time they were introducing it, so 10% of the population, once you hit 18, would go through it, was what I was told, so I gave it up. And obviously Singapore has it as well. So a few countries do, but I didn't expect to see it in Europe. For some reason, in my mind, I just didn't think that it existed, but there you go. But
yeah, Austria has it.
To that.
And one interesting small nugget, it's just for men. Women don't have to do that.
Okay. Yeah, interesting. But just from that, and I think what happened in your orange pilling moment effectively is the same with everyone, and it seems to come down to a few things. Number one, you're close to technology. So there's a natural affinity to something that is newer technology. Number two, you had time. If I think back to my orange pilling, it was during COVID lockdowns. I was locked in my house. I had nothing else to do, and I was pissed off at being locked down. So I naturally found it with time. And number three, you had sort of your inspirer, someone that was that person that was able to communicate the idea effectively to you. And with the three, that effectively orange pill you. It's effectively orange pill me. I went through the same thing with Seyr and the What Bitcoin Did podcast. And so I think it's those three seem to be the recipe for it. But what I would do now, because that's actually a good starting point, I'll quickly go back to that slide, because there's one thing really in here.
Cool. That's a really nice insight. I never broke it down like that. That's really fascinating to see that, where, okay, you need the time, you need someone that you can learn from, an inspirer, someone that you maybe look up to, and of course you need to be close to technology, where I hope we get over that. I see that slowly we are getting over that curve of you have to be close to technology. I've spoke to some people that have come to in 2024, and there are the people that come in 2024 that I've spoke to, around 50% of them, they are already over that. No, I'm not that close to technology. I don't understand what's going on with Bitcoin on a technology level. So we might are slowly getting there, where Bitcoin is manifesting more and more, where we don't have to be that close to technology.
Which you would have expected, because as an emerging technology, it is the innovators and the early adopters that understand it fundamentally that kick us off, and then we start to go mainstream. But what was interesting when I looked at this graph, and I think it leads to the next question I have for you, which is, if you look 3 down the bottom there, what I've realized in this is that whether you're introvert or extrovert largely doesn't matter. which is the first letter of these four on the Myers-Briggs. Like I switch between introvert, extrovert, and there's a good distribution, mainly introverts, but there are some extroverts in there that are adopting.
Maybe
where it becomes interesting is the next letters.
Maybe just quickly for the people that don't know about the Myers-Briggs, what are the four letters meaning? Do you know that? Because I don't know all of them.
100%. So let me show something that I prepared earlier. So here, each one of those letters in that four-letter combination is a duopoly. So you can either go either one or the other. So in the first one, which is between I and E, extrovert versus introvert, and then look, it's up on the screen there. People can read that. But I think that this is a term most people understand, whether they are outgoing, easy to talk to new people. But one thing that I like in this one here is the recharge by spending time with people versus recharge by spending time alone. And when you are an introvert, that social battery drains. When you're an extrovert, it gets pumped up when you're in and amongst people. So that one there, I think, is, for most people, relatively well understood. So when we go to the next one, that it becomes a bit different, because the terms S and N, which is the next letters, sensing versus intuition, I don't think do those terms justice, because both of them feel a bit wishy-washy, not grounded in any fact or reason. But when you actually get down to it, sensing, for whatever reason, practical, detail-orientated, focusing on the present. The intuition is actually imaginative, abstract, focus onto the future. And what's interesting when you go back to that first chart is that there's a lot of N's rather than S's. So there is a need to be more imaginative, abstract, and future-focused to become a Bitcoiner, apparently, in these early stages. And we see a lot of the S's coming in later on because they are about the here and now. So to the point around price action, what's happening now, and retrospectively looking backward, a lot of the hodlers, diamond hands out there, I'm going to assume are going to be in that N-type, future-focused, can understand abstract ideas, and stave off because they know what's about to come. So S and N. And then if we go to the next two combination.
And it makes sense because, sorry, I think it makes a lot of sense because especially if you're someone before 2020 or maybe even like before 2017, there's a lot of questions to Bitcoin. There was no block size war. There was no publicly traded company in Bitcoin. There was no country in Bitcoin. The president didn't talk about it. So right now, I think a lot of more ends will come into the scene because there's so many more questions already cleared up. But before that, there was so many things unclear, especially before the block size war. I think the block size war really showed how resilient Bitcoin and the full nodes on the users actually are. And it gave me a lot of, I read about the block size war probably like 3-4 months in. And this was something where I went up from, I don't know, having 10% of my allocation in Bitcoin to ramping it up to 50%. I sold all my stocks except Tesla and put it all in Bitcoin. This was a huge stepping stone for me. And then obviously afterwards came first publicly traded company. Now we have, I don't know, how many publicly traded companies are already in Bitcoin? I think like 50, 100, 150, something along those lines. I don't know the exact number.
We're about to see an avalanche now with Trump coming into office. Those 13F filings come March, you're going to see a lot of balance sheets holding it via the ETF.
100%, yeah. As BlackRock, they want to make a fee. They will go out and sell it as hard as they can. And then we have even a country in Bitcoin. We have Bhutan that, I don't know, have 75% of their purchasing power in Bitcoin, but it's a very small country also. It's smaller than some cities in Austria. Then El Salvador is really huge also for the symbolic. Obviously, they buying Bitcoin is nothing against a MicroStrategy or a bigger company buying Bitcoin because the purchasing power of MicroStrategy is so much bigger. But El Salvador is still symbolic, a really, really big thing, and it could develop as, hey, see what happens if you adopt Bitcoin. That thing can catapult a country up, and if El Salvador is really doing good, two things will be accomplished too. The first thing will be like Nayib Bukele will have a lot of the praise for that, obviously, as he was the leader, as he would also get all the shit for it if he doesn't deliver. And the second thing, Bitcoin will also be made accountable because all the things happen with Bitcoin. And then you can make the argument, oh, you adopt the sound money, and then all the other decisions are downstream from that. So that's something also really bullish. So my point here, just wanted to add that is the assets will become more just because there are so many more questions now cleared up.
100%. And I was just about to make that point as well, but you got it there, which is you're starting to see the proof points in terms of these people that are more practical, detail-oriented, focused in on the present. They are now seeing the returns for people who invested early and thus can start to think about it themselves in the moment. And the only thing I'd add to that is I'm actually looking more at Argentina rather than I am at the moment El Salvador. And I'll show you on the last chart, they've got a higher proportion of Bitcoin adopters than El Salvador at the moment in the population. So not the nation state side. So we'll get to that because I think that's going to be another bit of a proof point. And then on the T and the F, so now we're on that third letter of this 4-letter Myers-Briggs classification. So thinking, logic, analytics to make decisions, feeling is based on values and consequences and emotion. And so this is the part where it's interesting because if you see down the bottom of that chart, all of those people have F in there and that feelings element, FP specifically. And I'm already taking out from there is right now we're a logical play. We're one that takes a level of numbers, data in order to give you confidence into what this is. You have to go back, research money. You have to go back, research economies and fiat currencies and whatnot. Whereas people on the feeling sides are, while not bad, because we do need these sort of people in our society, you need balance. Unfortunately, for where we are in Bitcoin, it doesn't seem to resonate anywhere near as much. So that's the T and the F. Anything there before we see the last letters?
I don't have a specific point here, but I think it's interesting to see that there's always a tendency to one side, and it shows just because we're early and the bigger population size is on the other side usually, and this is where we come to the point of we are now in gradually where we build out all the points. We are slowly building everything up. That's why I also think this law of diminishing returns is BS. I think once we hit that suddenly point, that point where it's so obvious, where on the Christmas table now maybe one person or maybe a second person is into Bitcoin, but what happens all of a sudden if there is like 3-4 people out of 50, it makes a huge difference. Because all of a sudden, Bitcoin is more of a conversation piece, and there are actually Bitcoiners that know about it, and there are those leaders into the families that then show the way what Bitcoin is. And I see it also in my family. The people that adopt Bitcoin are the people the closest to me. My mom, dad, my sister, those are the people that I already have adopted Bitcoin. Then there's a cousin that also adopted Bitcoin because he's a really good friend of mine. He's really close also to me, and he also adopted Bitcoin. And then what also happens is, for example, my girlfriend, she's now the Bitcoiner in her company, not because she's a Bitcoiner, just because she has such a crazy Bitcoiner boyfriend, and people ask her all the time Bitcoin questions now. So
that is awesome.
People that are closer to an actual Bitcoiner, they also become like kind of the extended sun. Like the closer you get to the sun, the more sunburn you get, and the sunburn in that analogy is how much you get Bitcoin. And if and those people, we actually orange pill are very close to us, they are becoming an extended son of you. So that small cousin that I told you about is the sister of that cousin that is really close to me. And he orange pilled her, and he got him invested for her into Bitcoin and showed her the custody things and stuff like that. So
That's cool.
That exponential growth of someone being in the family, orange pilling like 5 people, and those 5 people maybe orange pill another 2 people. I think you can clearly see that in families. Obviously, there are people that are really good in orange pilling, and maybe they have a family of 30 people and they already orange pilled everyone. Maybe people are not as outgoing and don't want to, or maybe even are afraid of speaking about Bitcoin too much. So they maybe not even orange pilled one person, but overall, on average, a real Bitcoin orange pills a lot of people. Because you orange pills like a few persons, and those persons go ahead and then they go on the rabbit hole journey. So that's why it's also really important to have maybe in the phone a small document of like, oh, here are 3 podcasts you can listen to, here are 3 books you can read, here are 5 people you can follow on X. Just like have a document with those people. Just make a note on your app, and if you come to encounter someone, you can quickly send them that per WhatsApp or iMessage or whatever. And that's something I just developed over time of like, oh, those are the things I want to get into. And over time, actually, I have like now 2, 3 of those notes because different people need different things. So maybe someone already gets gold or gets sound money, and he still needs to go. He still needs a lot of insurance of the technology. He has to be more comfortable with how the technology actually works. He doesn't need to know why some money makes sense. And there may be other people that, oh, technology is really good. They may be into cryptos. They may be like investing always in the next meme coin, but they really need to learn about the sound money principles, the properties, why Bitcoin makes sense and why Solana does simply make no sense. So you need different ones for different ones, but definitely have something on your phone that you can quickly send someone if you want to orange pill people.
Yeah, 100%. One of the goals that I have with this particular article is to even bring a level of simplicity to what you just articulated, which I think is bang on the money. I think different people require a different message in order for it to land with them. In order to get to their aha moment, which we all do. And sometimes it's the same message given by someone else, just with a few words different. That could be the thing that triggers it, or it's just volume. But the piece here, which my mind drew to, which I think is related to yours as well, was on the feeling element. I don't think that they necessarily need to be the last of the people to adopt this. I just think that the message in the way in which we as the Bitcoin community are currently articulating the value proposition of Bitcoin largely relates back to people that are logic, analytically focused, because it is about the price, it is about the technical features, it is around sound money and the fiat system and the differences, whereas we don't appeal anywhere near as much in terms of the volume of the content. I think technical and money and whatnot's up here, but when we think about real world outcomes, things like impact on slavery, or we think about things like impact on the community's well-being, or other elements that may appeal more to the feelings. I just don't think we do it enough, which is why I liked the way that this has been described here, because being based on values and emotion, I don't think we're quite there yet. But I'll come back to that because I've got a question for you on specifically the emotional side of things with your guest.
Just one more thing that that's why I'm so big on bringing more voices to Bitcoin. I even get I get a lot of where I was a guest before, I want to come on again. And I'm happy to get people on again. But I'm always having a big difference between the first appearance and the second one. So at least 6 months. Actually, I want to get to a year, or even longer than that, because I want to make the space for the people on the podcast where there's a lot of different voices. Because I've seen it in real life, where people came up to me, hey, that one video with that one random guy who was just a random blab really helped me. Because maybe a Michael Saylor who has billions of dollars and just buys $1.5 billion dollars of Bitcoin on a Monday morning, maybe he's not as relatable to to a normal working person, because they cannot buy $1.5 billion dollars of Bitcoin. But someone that just has a normal job as a carpenter, as a teacher, as a doctor, he is way more relatable to the bigger majority of person. And so what I try to do, get the big guests on, like have Michael Saylor on, have Jeff Booth on, because they bring the stage. They build up my podcast stage for a bigger audience, but then use that stage to put on the teacher there, to put on the random pleb there, and find out their unique perspectives on Bitcoin, and find out their unique perspectives, because they speak to a different audience and they resonate with a different audience. And so maybe with that, I try to get a little bit outside of the bubble, try to get a little bit outside of where we already are. And yeah, I think the big ones are already anyways on so many podcasts. We don't need a 100th episode of the same guest all over again and rewash it. I will have a Michael Saylor on again. I will have all the big ones on again, but I don't want only them. I want also the other ones, and that's why I also do it 7 times per week, because if I only do it with 2 times or 3 times, I have to go towards the bigger ones, because they pay the podcast. Maybe a small insight, and why I'm so passionate about having that, the balance between, maybe it's also interesting for you as a podcaster, balance between Michael Saylor and the small ones. A Michael Saylor, let's say he makes X amount of money, he makes 10x more than a good episode. I made with the Michael Saylor episode 10x more than a normal good episode, and a normal episode and a normal good episode, there's also 10x jump in there of ad revenue, of other revenue streams. So having a normal pleb on is not profitable. That's why it hasn't been there since yet. Most podcasts now just try to get big ones on, because they get in a lot of audiences, they get a lot of eyeballs in, they get a lot of money in. That's why I think my specific model only works, because I do it 7 times per week, where I have a few slots with big ones who get the money and the audience and the stage in, and then the other ones who just are random blabs that are really contributing to the bigger perspective. But sorry, I just wanted to add that
and it
might be interesting.
Look, and it absolutely is, because I think about the where this podcast goes. And by the way, this is only 1 month in. The research is a bit longer, but I've got a 5-year plan for this particular venture. But I'm already looking at, how do you build, I'll call it the cheat code, which Peter McCormack talks to, which is, how do you get your balance sheet for your company based in Bitcoin growing at 29% ARR to the point where you get financially free, that the money doesn't drive the decision, so you can focus on just really cool shit. That's my ultimate goal. And so I'm building towards that, because eventually I just want to do this and not care about bringing on the big guest. Yes, it's important, awesome conversation, etc. But I don't want that to be the driving force, and rather bring in something unique, something different, something that might create value, but I just don't know. But you need to be able to invest. And so I want to get into that FU kind of money, so that you can just invest.
And we will get there, definitely.
Absolutely. And the last 2, and I know we digressed a bit for the audience, but the last 2 letters in that Myers-Briggs piece is J and P. Now, a lot of the Bitcoin adopters today have that J at the end of their Myers-Briggs personality piece, which is orientated towards structure, planning ahead, making formal decisions, as you can imagine that you would have to do if you're a trader, an investor. Whereas the P is talking about perceiving orientated, so more spontaneous, while they can adapt to change but plan less. And so, again, I think it talks more to the short-term nature of living life, which I can tell you now is a weight off your shoulders if you can live in the moment. But at the same point, it also then puts a bit of a blinkers on you for when you are looking long term. And so even looking at those points that I brought up, which P, and if I just go back a few here, P and the F, which is feeling, you see that that F and J. Oh, did I get that wrong? Here we go. I got my terms wrong way around. So it's F and J, which is feelings orientated yet structured, which are the ones that aren't necessarily adopting as much, as you can sort of see down here. T and J, F and J, T and P, T and P, T and P. So yeah, those P's are definitely popping up, but maybe not as much as I was thinking originally. Yeah, interesting. Any thoughts now that you're re-looking, having gone through those categories and now looking at those adoption rates? Is anything jumping out at you?
It's super interesting when we look at that, and one thing I want to note here is it's super interesting now for us because we are in that moment, in that early moment, and we want to see where is Bitcoin adoption going, who's like the next cohort of people. But eventually everyone comes in, and it will be super interesting to make the same thing in like 5 years, because I think not
100%.
Too much will change in 1 year, but have that like in 5 years again. And I think the chart will look way different because in 5 years, a lot of development will already be happened. And with everyone coming into the scene, we will get better to speaking to those people. Because everyone brings their own unique personality and their own unique ideas to the table. With someone that comes new to the Bitcoin scene, and he wants to or she wants to contribute something to Bitcoin, they bring their unique skill set, their unique perspectives, and their unique mind in there. And with that, they might be the next inspirer for someone that wouldn't had any inspirer before, because there was just not something in there in the Bitcoin community. And when we go on Bitcoin Twitter, we have that we have that picture of a Bitcoiner of like, oh yeah, he's male, he's probably like between 30 and 40 years old, he is into carnivore, he's into fitness, he's into gym. So like there's all those things we have as a picture of what a Bitcoiner is. If you actually look in the community, it's not that picture at all. There are females into Bitcoin. There are vegans into Bitcoin. There are people that don't work out every day into Bitcoin. And there are so many different people already in Bitcoin, but maybe there is not that one big, let's say, vegan Bitcoiner as a role model that speaks in all the events and is that one inspirer. So then if we have that one, and he might also be popular in the vegan community, then they get in there. It's also political, probably a little bit right-leaning. That doesn't have to be that way. Also maybe more on the other spectrums of political ranges, people will come in and will discover Bitcoin and then bring out a new cohort of people. I think that's my main takeaway. Of people will come into Bitcoin, but they need that inspirer. There are a lot. Either you're an innovator and you don't need that inspirer, and you're just like diving deep. But even then, you listen to someone else because people really like people, obviously. But we need different kind of inspirers and more voices. And that's kind of the thing I'm really passionate about, finding new voices and giving them a stage and giving them a way to start into the community. Because if we find those new voices, we also find the new Bitcoin crowd, and we also find the new comers into Bitcoin. And we just have encourage everyone that is around you that is into Bitcoin to talk about Bitcoin, to speak about Bitcoin, to be open about Bitcoin, and not to hide. I know people are fearful of being robbed because they are publicly on Bitcoin. They are fearful of their attack vectors. And if you decide to not be public about Bitcoin, that's fine. That's a decision we all have to respect. But if you want to do that, speak out, speak up. It's something you can do. And yeah, if you want to be on the podcast, just DM me. I usually go keep people on rather quickly and see if it's nice. I cannot guarantee that I publish the episode, but I can almost guarantee that we record one. And yeah, it's I really am passionate about finding new voices, new unique voices. That's the only thing I always say, like, oh, what's unique about you? Why should we record a podcast together? Because it's just the same thing that many other people always said. It's not unique. It's nothing new. But if it's something unique and you have something to share, you definitely should be heard.
100%. And I will give you a shout out because I got that chance on your podcast, I think about 6 months ago. So you were the first one to say yes to me when I was thinking about contributing to the space. And for the people that might be thinking, oh, can I reach out or not? I literally shot a DM. It was within a couple of hours. You said, yeah, sure, come on, it looks cool. Okay, that was easy. So, and I think so you gave me my shot, and then from there it sort of came into a few more. So I went on Bitcoin for Millennials with Bram, and then the Bitcoin Edge with Paula, Stack Finance Boys as well, and whatnot. So it started the snowball, and now has led to this. So your work's paying off. I'll give you that. So for anyone that's listening that wants to,
that.
Yeah, which is awesome.
Exactly, and people also they write me long emails. Not necessary. Just show me what's your opinion, and just like DM me on Twitter. Twitter is actually the best place to reach me. I check in there at least 2 times per day, even on a small on a not busy day. On sometimes 5 times, sometimes 10 times, sometimes too much.
The black hole. But quickly coming back, because I think that this chart here, so this is what I based one of my analyses of, which was talking about Bitcoin adoption across the world to benchmark where we were at. And to your point around the community isn't necessarily carnivore or whatnot, when you look at this graph and you start to see who are the biggest adopters by population around the world, you see the UAE, Singapore, Turkey, Argentina, Thailand as rounding out the top 5. And for the audience, I will say this data is probably 9 months out of date now. And as we head into a bull run, this is going to drastically shift when this is redone by AAA. So I will credit their sourcing of this data. But it just shows that it's not the traditional communities that most of us think would be adopting Bitcoin. You know, you and I are having this conversation now coming from very, very comfortable Western democratic societies, whereas when you start to look at some of these countries here, they aren't the countries you would have thought would have been higher on the adoption curve. And so to the point that you made, which was we all need that inspirer that gets us into the game, the one thing I want to run by you and maybe have a think about whether you've had guests come on from this perspective, which is adversity. The piece that I see in a lot of these countries is there's probably a greater amount of adversity being faced by the people as it relates to money, which is why the Argentina example in this data is quite interesting to me. Same with like Thailand and some of those other Asian countries that maybe aren't on solid footing when it comes to currency versus some of the Western societies. What's your view on the inspirer versus adversity?
That's super interesting. I never thought about that being an aspect of it. There's also, when we look at those countries, it's always interesting because Turkey, for example, is pretty high, as they have a pretty high inflation rate. Same with Argentina, they have a pretty broken monetary system. The UAE, I don't think they have that broken of a system. I don't know about them, but they probably are better off than I'm soon in Bitcoin Mania, so in Abu Dhabi. I hope to find out a little bit more about UAE there. But I think the inspirer is just really important. I think that's just something that is, if I had to point to one thing, I would even go the length of the inspirer being the most important in getting from interested in Bitcoin to getting to Bitcoin being a Bitcoiner. But the first thing has to happen first. Someone has to be interested in Bitcoin. I think the inspirer is just getting someone that is already has an interest for it to understand Bitcoin and being a Bitcoiner. So for the interest, there are a couple of reasons where what I look at. The first one for me is the pain. Do you have a huge pain in your life? Do you have as Michael Saylor talks about, do you have a need to know about Bitcoin? And there are different needs to know. There's like the need to know about Bitcoin because you are struggling financially and you want to get out of that bad circle, that bad spiral. The other need to know, for example, Donald Trump, he doesn't need to know about Bitcoin because of finances. He needs to know about Bitcoin because he needs votes and he needs someone he needs people to vote for him, and people would not vote for him in that quantity in Bitcoin when he wouldn't have been in the Bitcoin stage, and we wouldn't have been so talking about Bitcoin as strategic reserve and also bringing on a lot of Bitcoiners in his administration. So he had a different need to know about Bitcoin than some other people might have. So the pain aspect, the why I'm getting into Bitcoin is a big one. And then there is also people that just want a better life. They are fine here, but they want to aspire higher. But I think the pain is actually a big one. That's why Turkey and Argentina are up there. That's why El Salvador adopted Bitcoin. It was literally the murder capital of the world. They had a big hurting point, and we will see that happening more and more. And then there's also countries like Switzerland. I'm surprised to do not see Switzerland here at all. But yeah, I think Switzerland also has a quite good adoption rate. I don't know if it's just too small of a country to be mentioned here. Might be.
No, Switzerland is right there. I'm not sure you can see my cursor at 11.5% adoption.
Oh yeah. Oh well, look, Switzerland.
No, it is definitely there. Yeah, because I was looking at this Ukraine adversity under the war. Canada had the trucker protests, so that probably accelerated theirs. Australia was the most locked down country in the world during COVID. That probably accelerated ours. And so I think to the point, pain, I sort of call that one adversity, when people are facing something, some sort of adverse event in their life and they're forced to get there, versus an inspirer that is able to come from a point of pleasure, I'll call it. So pain, pleasure, two sides of the same coin sort of thing here. Both can lead to the same outcome, which is interesting. But one thing that I'll note for the audience here, because one of the questions that I always get around Bitcoin is, are we too late? It's at 100K or almost there, whatnot. I will point you to the last bar on this chart, which is 6.9%, which talks to globally, the population globally that has adopted Bitcoin at the moment. Now, this is just one data source, but directionally it's going to be correct. We're sub 10%. That just means that if we are at $100,000 now at 10% of the population, think about this when we start to get towards 50 and 100% adoption as we head towards a medium of exchange. That is how early we are in. And this is even before we are crossing the chasm, which will be the next article. We are so early, and the data shows this as well. So I've spoken to a lot of my colleagues over recent days as they've seen my content pop up. We are incredibly early. So don't be phased.
Do you know what they call as adopted Bitcoin? Is that someone that just has 1% allocation to an ETF? Is that also called as a Bitcoiner?
So I think this data was was at a point drawn at a point in time when the ETF weren't at scale, so it wouldn't have captured any of that ETF data. And it also has some elements of crypto, the shit coins mixed into it as well. So I use this one as a directional steer as to who's adopted digital assets, which means that they've had enough of an impetus to at least put fiat into this system, not 100% Bitcoiners. So that again is distorting the data. Bitcoin's probably a bit less, to be honest, because we know a big portion of that will probably be the shitcoiners, but directionally it's going to be accurate. The problem with data in these things are, because it's de-identified, because of the privacy elements of Bitcoin. I could be one person with 5 wallets. That's not 5 people adopting Bitcoin. That's just me with effectively 5 bank accounts with different holdings in each. So I think what they've done here is if you go to their website, and I'll put the link into the description so that anyone can go to their website and actually see how they've done the research. They've got a number of steps which they use in order to clean the data to account for a lot of those double countings, etc., which leads to these numbers. So I'm really looking forward to seeing the 2025 data of this to see the change. Because I don't think that it's the hard number. Directionally, I think it's rather accurate. What I'm interested to see under the same methodology on the collection of the data, what's the year-on-year shift? What's the pace of adoption that we're looking at? And that gives us far more richer insight into it. So that'll be quite interesting to see.
I asked that question because when we talk about people having adopted Bitcoin, there is different. Let's go back to my family example. I'm 100% into Bitcoin. You can count me to any being a Bitcoiner statistics as being on the Bitcoin side. But then there is, for example, also my mom. She just has a little bit of money in the Bitcoin, and I hold it for her because it's just like a very small amount of money. I don't want her to be on an exchange. I just hold it for her. It's easier than that, and doesn't make a huge difference on mine anyways. Then there is my dad. He has a substantial amount in Bitcoin. He holds it also himself and stuff like that. So is my mom not counting as a Bitcoiner? My dad probably definitely counts. And then there is also my cousin who just put like, I don't know, a few €100 in the Bitcoin. It's like a small amount of what she actually has. Is that already also counting as someone who adopted Bitcoin? The question that I'm interested in, how many people actually have over 50% of their liquid net worth in Bitcoin? Like that, how big is that number? Because if Bitcoin is actually sound money, it makes sense personally to hold most of your money in Bitcoin and have only a small allocation to your house, to your company, to maybe some stocks that you're passionate about, and have 80% cash in being Bitcoin.
BTC,
BTC, yeah, exactly. So this is where what I'm looking at is like, we might be at 7% adoption worldwide when we look at the statistics, but how many of those 7% of people actually have over 50% of their net worth in Bitcoin? I think the number gets very quickly very small. Just think about your own personal circle of like, how many people do you know, and how many of those people have over 50% of their net worth in Bitcoin? 2, 5,
and
1?
This is where I think the conversations need to be broadened outside of the West, because when you looked at those top number of countries, and you're going to go to Bitcoin Mena, so you can probably ask the question there, but there's a huge Middle Eastern adoption of this. There's a large Southeast Asian adoption of this. There's a large South American adoption of this. And when you're coming from a point of adversity, and you could talk to, I've watched Javier Malay's, a couple of his talks where people, and he openly admits, or maybe it was someone else in Argentina, but it was people earn the peso and then they get out of it on the same day, and they need to find exit ramps out of it because of the inflation rate. So actually there was a large proportion of Argentinians in and amongst that 25% population that were doing it in order to get rid of their local currency to get into Bitcoin itself. So in terms of the people in these in what I'd call some developing countries, some you would call developed already, but under turmoil, I would say have a large amount, because number one, their wealth is actually probably not that great in comparison to what we may perceive wealth to be. Number two, they're trying to get rid of their wage in order to protect it in BTC. So when I thought about it initially, I thought that, it's probably a small fraction. We're talking about 1% of that is probably more than 50%. And then I actually flipped and I said, actually, I'm taking that from the lens of an Australian where house and land is sort of the norm. We're largely all middle class. Yeah, from my perspective, absolutely, I agree with you. But from those developing countries, from those turmoil-afflicted countries, I think we'd be seeing a very different story, and they're the bulk of the adoption at the moment.
100%, yeah. And for people, because am I late is it already too late to Bitcoin? No, I like, first of all, it's never too late to adopt the sound money, even if it's like 5 million per coin. But yeah, of course, earlier the better. But it brings also negative sides to it. But you are definitely not late. Like, you are in the first 1% that actually adopts Bitcoin if you are adopting it with like over 50% of your net worth. When we look at that 7% number, as we just discussed, it's skewed towards everyone adopting Bitcoin. If you go heavily in Bitcoin, you're probably in the first 1%, maybe like 0.5% of the population. I don't know how big the number actually is. It's really hard to know also. And then we come to the conclusion of like, how many people actually understood Bitcoin to like 80%. I think nobody's at 100%. Nobody can really understand Bitcoin to a full extent. It's just too deep of a topic. I'm a good example because I learn every day something new, and I have an everyday Bitcoin podcast with a different Bitcoiner, and I'm like, oh, I never heard about that. What is that? So that's an interesting insight. But how many people actually have a good understanding of Bitcoin? Is it 100,000 people? Is it 1 million people? If you really understand Bitcoin to a high level, you are in the 0.001% of the population probably. Like that's like a very small amount of actual people. Most buy Bitcoin and have no clue. Like, let's be really clear about that. And most people that buy Bitcoin on exchange, they leave it on exchange. So everyone that leaves Bitcoin completely on exchange probably hasn't understood it to a full extent. Other than that, maybe they are forced to do it because they have some ETF or some RAFI or like something like that. Obviously, that's understandable. But if you have the option of self-custody, you should do self-custody. So yeah, how many people actually have understood it? I don't think that number is huge. I think that's a very small number.
But I don't think that that's necessarily a barrier, because I could say the same thing to, if I asked a non-techie, so I'm not going to ask you because you're a software developer, but I asked the question, what's the internet? I would say that 99% of the population couldn't actually describe what the internet actually is, which is a global interconnected network of computers around the world using HTTP and TCP IP in order to... No one's going to know that. And I think we're in the stage where a lot of us are talking about those fundamentals. But in the reality, once this is a mass adopted technology, it'll just be synonymous as, it's just Bitcoin. Because there'll be enough of a confidence that everybody understands it, even as an abstract term, fundamentally, like we do with the internet today, yet not being able to describe it at all, at a technical level.
That's why I think we have to come to more of the understanding of like, a Bitcoiner is someone who has a good amount of his financial energy into Bitcoin. So I don't know, that's actually a question that I have a lot. What is the future allocation that is kind of the default? Every finance advisor, your grandma is advising you on like, let's just have like 80% of your money in Bitcoin, that's safe, or have 50% of your money in Bitcoin. Because if it's the by far safest thing to do, and it's still appreciating every year, it should have a big proportion of your money in, if you're not a risk seeker. And most people are not risk seekers. Most people just want to do a job and save their financial energy in Bitcoin. So what is the allocation for the normal pleb out there in let's say 20, 30, 50 years, when Bitcoin is kind of the standard in the world? Maybe it's 80%, 70%, 50%, I don't know. But it's definitely more than 5%.
I'll give you a controversial take. I think if we are looking at that 30 to 50 year time frame, there's a couple of things that I considered. The first is that it's likely to be widely adopted by the population. So the 29% ARR is just going to not exist anymore, because we've already got the majority of the population having converted out of the fiat system, driving up that market capitalization. And by that point, maybe it has already toppled the US dollar. And at that point, it's price stability. And so it becomes a real store of value and now is shifting into a medium of exchange, which means that you aren't going to get the return. And so in the short term, I actually see, you should be over allocating because the risk reward is just so ridiculous at the moment. In 50 years, I actually see that coming down because the risk won't be there, but the return won't be there either. And investing into companies that are producing value are the ones that you'd allocate to. So I'd almost see it as you should be up here on your Bitcoin allocation and money today and stocks. And it's going to do something like this as it becomes the safe haven. Like how we treat bonds today will be what Bitcoin is in the future, which is just a stable asset returning, a 2, 3, 4, 5%, which is your hedge against the risk of companies trying to do value, which gets you your 20, 30, 40% returns. And so I think it'll shift. But you have to picture a world where it is mass adopted, where you've got price stability, where it's acting like a bond today, if not just basic currency, because it is now widely adopted as a medium of exchange.
That's an interesting point. I'm still not sure that the allocation, like if you're an investor and if you're actually trying to figure out where to put my money, I 100% agree. And I was in the stocks before, and it was a lot of fun, even though it was nerve-wracking and it was a lot of sleepless nights even. But it was a lot of fun, and I want to do it again. And so probably 5, 10, even 15 years, something like that, I probably start really reallocating some Bitcoin into companies that have a balance sheet in Bitcoin, but they're providing value outside of that. Maybe that starts maybe sooner. I don't know. But most people are not like that. When I look at my family, most people just have euros, and I'm fascinated by it. They might have a house. Most of them do invest in their own house. That's kind of the savings account of an Austrian, their own house. But they might have some stocks. They might have some ETFs. But their overwhelming majority is just having a euro bank account. And I'm surprised of how many people have a large proportion of their wealth in euros, when it's so clear it's losing purchasing power every year. And just going from it losing purchasing power 10% per year to it's gaining, let's say, 2% every year in purchasing power, what Bitcoin might do, or 1%, whatever. That's a huge shift already, because all of a sudden it at least accumulates on purchasing power. It at least not goes down. So it's just a question I'm really really torn apart, because in the one point is of course it makes a lot of sense to put a lot of money in Bitcoin, but at the same time it will be super boring. Bitcoin will be the most boring asset on earth, and if you say I put all my money in Bitcoin, and everyone is duh,
100%.
Why are you even announcing that?
My fear, funnily enough, with being a Bitcoin hodler is that I put so much energy just because it's a high risk, high reward asset as the market perceives it. So I perceive it as a low risk, high reward asset because we've done the work. And so we've minimized the risk and now reaping the returns on the reward. My fear is that this becomes the mindset and I just hold it. And instead of doing what Bitcoin was supposed to do, which is be an effective store of value and a medium of exchange, which is if I put in energy into the world in order to create a return through value to my community, my country, whatever it might be, that it's not just sitting there doing nothing. It needs to be productive. It needs to be able to create the new innovations like what we see Elon Musk does with his capital. It's not just sitting there and he's the biggest billionaire. It's SpaceX, it's Tesla, it's Boring Company, it's Neuralink. I want to be someone that takes the value that Bitcoin is allowing us to save now, but then deploying it to create real world impact. So I've got another idea. My ideological stance is I don't want to actually be holding that much Bitcoin. I want it deployed, doing stuff productive in the world around us eventually. But right now, incredible risk return asset.
I had, maybe it's interesting insight. I quit my job in February for the podcast, and I didn't had a huge income. I had an short-term 3 months project with a company which gave me revenue, but it was not clear if that continues, and it actually didn't continue. So I was prepared to live off my Bitcoin for 1.5 years. I was like, 1.5 years, I will do whatever it takes to make this thing possible, and I don't care if I lose all my Bitcoin with it. So that was a huge risk I took, and I took it because I was like, what do I have from a bunch of Bitcoin if I still have to work, if I still don't know what to do with my life, if I still am unsatisfied with my work? Because like, even if Bitcoin goes up so crazy, you have to find something you're passionate about. You cannot just sit on the beach, like, that's boring. I've done that for a week, and I get bored after the second day. Like, I'm the wrong person. Maybe there's a person that can do it for a month, but I don't know if there's a person that can do it for 2 months. So that's that. So I need activity. I need to do something. And so I was like, okay, I like my job. Actually, I did enjoy it, but there's something I'm way more passionate about. I did IT security, but I'm way more passionate about Bitcoin. And I want to emphasize that because I really like my job. Like, it was a good job. I had prospects and everything like that. But I just wanted to do something with Bitcoin. And I asked myself the simple question, do I want to do IT security or Bitcoin? I want to do Bitcoin. And simple as that, I just got with my gut, and it was like a feeling, intuition thing that I just did. And was like prepared to live off my Bitcoin for 1.5 years, which luckily I never had to do. I still had a positive income every month, which surprised me completely that I actually did that. But it's important that we Bitcoiners use that purchasing power, use that financial energy that we have to actually do something meaningful in the world. It doesn't solve any problem if we sit on it. Right now, probably it makes most sense to sit on it. Other than that, if you are an OG that has like 1,000 Bitcoin, maybe it already makes sense to reallocate some and see where you can make the community better, or maybe reinvest in something for Bitcoin or in some other project that you have. But if you just have like 0.2 Bitcoin, hold on to it. And just try to figure out how to provide value now. But that 0.2 Bitcoin might be a sizable amount of money in 50 years. Probably is a good sizable amount of money. And you probably stack more. So you probably have like maybe 0.5. Maybe even you get to 1 Bitcoin in that time. Let's see how crazy the bull run will be this next year. But you should reallocate your energy, and you should provide for the community, which is also then interesting because I was prepared to lose all my Bitcoin, and I ended up now with more Bitcoin than I have started, and I'm just 8 months in. So do something good for the world, and I think you will be rewarded. Has little to do with Bitcoin itself. It's more about how to provide value and be a productive member of society. But Bitcoin makes that way easier.
100%. I think more Bitcoiners need to talk similar to what you just did. So that's going to be clipped, and that's going to be pushed out into social media, 100% first one, because it's a means by which you can live your life. The purpose of your life is not holding sats and then dying with sats on your tombstone. It is living the life and the experience in the moment, because we think that Bitcoin's scarce, etc. The scarcest asset is your time, because you're only here for a set amount of time on this planet. You don't want to be hodling. You want to be using it in some way, shape, or form that brings meaning beyond the money. So, massively important message. Could not agree more. I might now start to wrap us up, because in the background you probably noticed me writing nonstop notes as you were going through, because when you were talking through the Myers-Briggs piece and some of your learnings from your conversations, I think I've come up with a high-level formula, and this is the intent. I was trying to get to a framework, and I think I've largely gotten it from left to right to arm Bitcoiners with how can you approach the orange pilling conversation for the next wave of Bitcoin adopters. So the very first part of this equation, I've got curiosity, which is what you said up front, that you need to be curious. But then I changed that to number one, mindset, aligned to ego death, which is talking about that a sense of pride. So my Bitcoin principles that I've published, which talks to minimizing those adverse human behaviors, I think ties into that. But there's something there around the mindset and being egoless is your front door before we can even get to the starting line. The second one is that pleasure pain. You need that inspirer in a point of pleasure that is some sort of return on the investment, or you've got the pain. You're in hardship and you need to try and get yourself out of it. And both of those are the inspirer that then takes your mindset to action. And then from there, it's then about the finance front door. Where we are today, yes, you're going to have finance. That's the hook that gets people interested. And so, yes, you might need to lead with that. But then you need to quickly pivot from that finance front door into something meaningful for the individual. And this is where we start to tailor it towards the person that we're talking to. So if you're talking to a nurse, that's probably going to be far more altruistic in nature and people orientated because that's the typical profile, then link that outcome to not money alone, but what it does for the community, for people, and the impact on things that they may be interested in. Whereas when you're talking to a tech bro, it's completely different. So I sort of see that there's this hierarchy and you can use the Myers-Briggs to help think about who that person is and then tailor the conversation accordingly. But it looks like mindset, pain or impetus, financial front door on the returns and what you're seeing to get a bit of excitement. But then once you've got the hook in, then start to differentiate it to the individual.
100%. And the most important thing is be present as a Bitcoiner. Be out there. Be available. People will come to you. I completely shifted from being an aggressive Bitcoin orange pillar to just being there for people. Because I've noticed people will develop an interest. And if I see someone having an interest in Bitcoin, then you can go into how to, as you just described, how to orange pill in the best way. But the most important thing overall is just like being open, being someone that think maybe of yourself as like an how are the Apple employees called, like genius bar employee, who just is, if someone comes with a question, you try to get the most out of them. Like you try to help them as good as you can. And I think that's something you even learn in sales, you even learn in when you go into with customers. You're not there to get their money. You're there to provide value for them. You're there to help them with a problem. And so be that person that is open to talk about. And if he wants to talk about it, he should have you as someone that is the Bitcoin companion. And if he doesn't, well, then leave him. He will come probably in 1 year or 2 years later when the price shoots up to $500,000, and he's like, oh, where do you buy Bitcoin again? So I switched to completely being passive, and it's interesting. It's because also I'm so vocal about Bitcoin online that everywhere I go offline, Bitcoin is a conversation automatically. So that's kind of best case. If you can be vocal online on all your social media profiles about Bitcoin, you will experience the same thing that I experienced. You don't have to bring it up. That you are being in the room is the sole reason why it's gonna be brought up. And there was a friend's brunch actually, probably already 2 months ago, and there were like 20 people there, and there are some people there that I've never seen. So people brought other people, and I just was there, and I got introduced everywhere as the Bitcoin guy, and funny enough, I talked about Bitcoin and a lot, almost like a presentation I gave in the middle of the brunch then, and I went away, and then I came back, and I just saw like there was like 2-3 groups of people, and they all kind of talked about Bitcoin, and it was so great to see, because I never brought it up. Someone else brought it up, and they asked me questions about it. I just answered. So don't be a dick about Bitcoin. Don't be like, oh yeah, you have to buy Bitcoin. No, like if they have a question about Bitcoin, you should answer that. You should be there for them. And being an passive Bitcoin educator, that's how I call it, is I think the best orange pilling strategy, and is also best for your relationships. Because if you're aggressive on Bitcoin, that's probably not good for your relationships. One thing that I also want to note, be someone that other people look up to. Be someone that lives a happy, meaningful, and healthy life, because people notice that. If you live happy and if you live healthy, and most Bitcoiners are going through that journey of improving their diet, improving their fitness, improving their bodies. If you're that person, people naturally see like, oh, he's happy, he's fulfilled in life, like, oh, and he's also into Bitcoin. Like those things get associated with. So if you are that person, you have a chance of being that inspirer within your region, within your environment. So yeah, be a good person. And that's where we also come back to what we were saying earlier. If you provide for the community, if you do something for your neighbors, that stands out, and that is good for you. I think Bitcoin is also really big on family, on neighborhood, on being a connector in your region, and that's really it's great to see. And being that person, you have a high likelihood to orange pill your whole, maybe like your small town.
Yeah, 100% agree. I went through the same thing. Push. Realize push does not work. You cannot force something onto someone. You need to let them come to you. And the one addition, because I think you covered it exceptionally well, is do not feel guilt because you're not pushing people that you may love around you to realize this massive return. You should not feel guilty that they're not orange pilled as quickly as you would like, because at the end of the day, they need to be ready to come through. And to your point, you'll cause more damage than good if you continue to push. And once you get to that point and you get that weight lifted off your shoulders of that guilt of not getting them across the line because you are so bullish and so invested into it, then life becomes a hell of a lot easier. That would be my only add to it, but I think you put it incredibly well.
Absolutely. And I just want to note, this is an incredible podcast. I did like a 15 or 20 podcast guest appearances already, something along those lines. And I love how you go through the podcast. You're really thoughtful and you try to bring new perspectives in there. So I really enjoyed this episode already a lot, like really, really cool. And I think everyone is listening because I know the statistics. Usually, if there are 100 people subscribed, usually 1,000 people are listening, something along those lines. So if you're listening to this, really consider subscribing to Arv. He's doing an amazing work, and give him love, because this is the signal a content creator or podcast host needs to get from the audience of he's doing great work. And I think you're doing great work. And if you're listening to this or watching this and you think like, oh, like that episode is really nice, I got a lot of value out of that, giving that signal back, giving that value back to the host, to the creator, is a huge signal also for you to like, oh, I can continue that, because I started that whole thing just because I got a signal from a sponsor of like, oh, how you can make money with that. And then like, oh, yeah, maybe let's ramp it up. And that's why I do the daily Bitcoin podcast now, because I got a signal from someone. So just like giving him comments, giving him even like small donations, giving him some sort of love back is really important. Just like support your favorite creators, because it's not as profitable, especially in the beginning, as some people might think.
Mate, I really appreciate that, especially from someone that's done the work and gotten to this point. You've proven it with the sheer volume. So I'm a huge admirer of your work. So thank you so much. It really does mean the world. With that, I want to leave you with the closing notes. Where can people find you, and any last thoughts you want to leave the audience with?
Yeah, I don't know if you put the name anywhere, but it's just my name written together, Robin, Seyr, Seyr, together, and you can find me everywhere. I'm on Twitter and YouTube mostly. So Twitter is where I network, where I communicate, where I just put out random thoughts or put out also the full episodes actually, but most people don't watch it on Twitter. And then on YouTube is the main place where you can see the podcast. But I'm also on Spotify, on Fountain, on all the podcast platforms. Actually getting pretty good also there. I get a lot of feedback also there now. So yeah, you can find me everywhere. I'm also on Instagram, TikTok, but not as much as I should be probably. But yeah, X and YouTube are my main places where I go, and the podcast platforms. And yeah, like just if you don't want to be on a podcast and get on stage, I'm happy to try it out with you. I can't guarantee that I publish the episode, but I definitely respond to your DM. That's the only guarantee I really can give. And I'm really big on finding new diamonds, new people that want to come on the scene. And as yourself, I'm really honored that you chose or you that my podcast was the first one you came on, because I think you will be really big in the community. And then I can say, hey, he was first time he ever went anywhere. He was in my podcast, so I think I will brag with that in the future.
Don't worry, I'll be bragging about being on your podcast as well once you blow up as well. Robin, thank you so much. This has been a great help, and I will link everything that Robin just went through in the description below. So dive into those descriptions and you can get a link directly to his profiles and to his channel. And so with that, huge thank you. As soon as this gets published, you'll be the first to know, because there'll be some nuggets in there from yourself. And again, thank you so much, and we'll see you all in the next episode.
Perfect. Thank you so much.